In 1973, a photography student bought a used Polaroid camera for $15. The first photo she took showed her roommate lying in a hospital bed, unconscious. 3 days later, her roommate was hit by a car. The camera didn't just capture moments, it captured endings. And now, 50 years later, someone found that same camera at an estate sale and just took their first photo. Welcome to Lost Mystery Stories. Before we dive into this chilling tale of cursed photography, supernatural predictions, and the deadly price of knowing the future, tell me in the comments, have you ever found something at an estate sale that seemed too good to be true? And if you believe these forgotten stories of objects that hold dark secrets deserve to be told, hit that subscribe button because today's mystery will make you think twice about every vintage camera you see. This is the story of a Polaroid that doesn't just capture moments, it captures endings. A camera that's been claiming lives for over 50 years, passing from owner to owner, leaving a trail of tragedy in its wake. What would you do if you could see death before it happened? And what would you sacrifice to save the people you love? Now let's begin our story. The smell of old books and mothballs filled Maya Chen's nostrils as she wandered through the cluttered estate sale. Mrs. Holloway had died 3 weeks ago at 89, leaving behind a Victorian house packed with decades of accumulated memories. Maya wasn't looking for anything specific, just hoping to find vintage items for her photography studio downtown. She paused at a table covered with camera equipment. Most of it was junk, broken light meters, tangled cables, expired film. But tucked behind a stack of yellowed photography magazines was something that made her heart skip. A Polaroid SX70, the iconic folding camera from the 1970s. "How much for this?" she asked the estate sale coordinator, a thin woman with tired eyes. The woman glanced at the camera and shrugged. $20? Maya tried to hide her excitement. A working SX70 could sell for hundreds online. She examined it more closely. The leather was cracked but intact, the mirror seemed clean, and the bellows showed no holes. Best of all, there was still a cartridge of film inside. "I'll take it." Back at her studio, Maya couldn't resist testing her new acquisition. She aimed it at her reflection in the window and pressed the shutter. The familiar mechanical whir filled the room as the photo emerged, that distinctive white-bordered square that had defined instant photography for generations. She watched the image develop slowly the way Polaroids always did. First, a ghostly outline appeared, then colors began to emerge. But something was wrong with the picture. Instead of showing her standing by the window in her bright studio, the photo depicted her lying on a hospital bed, eyes closed, surrounded by medical equipment. Her skin was pale, almost gray, and there was something unsettling about the stillness of her body in the image. Maya stared at the photo, her hands trembling slightly. It had to be some kind of malfunction. Maybe the film was old or there had been a double exposure. She shook the photo gently as if that might change what she was seeing. But the image remained the same. Her own face, peaceful but lifeless, in what looked like a hospital room. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the photo, which she'd hidden in her desk drawer like a guilty secret. She told herself it was just a coincidence. Old film could do strange things, create impossible images. But something about the photo felt too real, too specific. The next morning, she decided to research the camera's history. The estate sale coordinator had mentioned that Mrs. Holloway had been a photography teacher in the 1970s. Maybe there were records, students who might remember this particular camera. At the local library, Maya found archived newspapers from the 1970s. She searched for mentions of Mrs. Holloway and found several articles about Millfield Community College's photography program. In a 1974 article about student achievements, there was a photo of a young woman holding a Polaroid camera, the same model Maya had bought. The caption read, "Photography student Linda Reeves with her prize-winning instant camera, purchased after saving money from her part-time job." Maya's blood ran cold. Linda Reeves. She knew that name. More searching revealed the tragic story. Linda Reeves had died in 1974, just 1 year after the newspaper photo was taken. She'd been hit by a drunk driver while crossing the street near campus. The accident report was brief but devastating. She died instantly. But what haunted Maya was another detail she found buried in the police records. 3 days before her death, Linda had taken her roommate, Patricia Sullivan, to the hospital after Patricia was found unconscious in their dorm room. Patricia had recovered completely, but the incident had been mysterious. Doctors never determined what had caused her collapse. Maya's hands shook as she read Patricia Sullivan's statement to police. Linda had taken a photo of me with her new camera just a few days before I ended up in the hospital. When the photo developed, it showed me lying in a hospital bed, unconscious. We thought it was just a weird coincidence. Maya drove home in a daze. The camera was sitting on her desk exactly where she'd left it, innocuous and silent. But now she knew its secret. Somehow, impossibly, it could predict death. She thought about destroying it, throwing it in the trash, smashing it with a hammer. But something stopped her. If the camera could really see the future, if it could predict death, then maybe it could also prevent it. Maya had an idea. She grabbed her phone and called her younger brother Alex. He was always getting into stupid situations. Drunk driving, extreme sports, reckless stunts that made their parents gray with worry. "Hey sis, what's up?" Alex's voice was cheerful, oblivious. "Can you come to my studio? I want to take some photos for your dating profile." Alex laughed. "Since when do you care about my love life? Just come over. Please." An hour later, Alex was posing awkwardly in front of Maya's backdrop. She used her regular digital camera first, taking normal headshots. Then, casually, she picked up the Polaroid. "Let me try this vintage camera too. It might give the photos a cool retro look." She aimed the SX70 at Alex and pressed the shutter. The photo emerged and they waited for it to develop. Maya's heart nearly stopped when the image appeared. It showed Alex in a hospital bed, his head bandaged, machines beeping around him. But unlike her own photo, Alex's eyes were open. He was alive but clearly injured. "Weird," Alex said, looking at the photo. "That's not how I'm dressed." Maya forced a smile. "Must be a double exposure. These old cameras can be glitchy." But as Alex left, Maya studied the photo more closely. In the background, she could see part of a calendar on the hospital wall. The date was visible, 3 days from now. Maya spent the next 2 days in agony. She couldn't tell Alex about the camera. He'd think she was crazy. But she also couldn't let him walk into whatever accident the photo had predicted. She tried calling him constantly, making excuses to keep him home. When that didn't work, she showed up at his apartment. "Maya, you're being weird," Alex said, opening his door with a puzzled expression. "What's going on?" I'm worried about you." "Can't a sister worry?" "Not like this. You've called me 12 times since yesterday." Maya glanced around his apartment, looking for clues about what might cause his accident. Everything seemed normal. No obvious dangers, no signs of risky behavior planned. "What are you doing today?" she asked. "Meeting some friends at the climbing gym." "Same as every Saturday." Maya's stomach dropped. "Rock climbing. That had to be it." "Don't go." "What?" "Don't go climbing today. Please." Alex stared at her. "Maya, are you having some kind of breakdown? You're acting really strange." Maya took a deep breath. She had to try a different approach. "There was an accident at that gym yesterday. Someone fell and got hurt badly. I heard about it on the news." It was a lie, but she was desperate. Alex pulled out his phone and started searching. "I don't see anything about that. Just trust me, okay? Stay home today. Watch Netflix. Order pizza. Live dangerously by eating too much cheese." Alex studied her face for a long moment. Finally he sighed. "Fine. But you owe me an explanation for this weird behavior." Maya felt relief wash over her as she drove home. She'd done it, she'd prevented the accident. The camera had shown her Alex's future and she'd changed it. But as she pulled into her driveway, her phone rang. It was Alex. "Maya, you're not going to believe this. Jake called and said there really was an accident at the climbing gym today. Some guy fell and hit his head. They're saying it could have been a lot worse." Maya's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm at Jake's place." "But Maya, how did you know?" Before she could answer, she heard a commotion in the background. Alex's voice became muffled, like he'd covered the phone. "What's happening?" Maya asked. "There's something wrong with Jake. He just collapsed. We're calling an ambulance." Maya's blood turned to ice. "Alex, where exactly are you?" "Jake's apartment on 5th Street. "Maya, what's—" The line went dead. Maya raced to 5th Street, her mind spinning. She'd prevented Alex's climbing accident, but somehow he'd still ended up in danger. It was as if fate was determined to fulfill the camera's prediction, just finding another path. When she arrived at Jake's building, an ambulance was already there. She found Alex in the lobby, shaken but uninjured. "What happened?" she asked. "Jake had some kind of seizure. He fell and hit his head on the coffee table. There was so much blood." Alex ran his hands through his hair. "I tried to help him and I slipped in the blood. Hit my head on the wall." Maya looked at Alex's forehead. There was a small cut, already bandaged by the paramedics. "They want to take me to the hospital too, just to be safe," Alex said. "Possible concussion." At the hospital, Maya sat in the waiting room while Alex was examined. The familiar smell of disinfectant made her nauseated. This was exactly what the camera had shown. Alex in a hospital bed, head bandaged, surrounded by medical equipment. But he was alive. The photo had been accurate, but not in the way she'd expected. A doctor came out to speak with her. "Your brother is fine. Minor concussion, but he should recover completely. We'll keep him overnight for observation." Maya nodded, relief flooding through her. She'd been so focused on preventing Alex's death that she hadn't considered the possibility that the camera might not always predict fatal outcomes. As she sat by Alex's bedside, watching him sleep, Maya thought about Linda Reeves and her roommate Patricia. Patricia had survived her mysterious collapse, but Linda had died 3 days later. Maya remembered the police report. Linda had been hit by a car while rushing to visit Patricia in the hospital. A terrible realization began to form in Maya's mind. She pulled out her phone and searched for more information about Linda's death. In an archived local newspaper, she found a detailed account of the accident. Linda had been crossing the street outside Millfield General Hospital when she was struck. She'd been visiting her roommate, who had suffered a mysterious collapse 3 days earlier. The same pattern. Someone close to Linda had been hospitalized, and while rushing to help them, Linda had died. Maya looked at the photo of herself that the camera had taken. She was in a hospital bed, pale and still. She'd assumed it predicted her own death, but what if she was wrong? What if the photo showed her after some kind of accident or illness that she would survive? And what if the real danger was what would happen to someone else while she was hospitalized? The next morning, Maya drove to her parents' house. She needed to understand more about the camera, about Linda Reeves, and about the pattern she was beginning to see. Her mother was in the garden, tending to her roses. "Mom, did you know Mrs. Holloway well?" Her mother looked up, surprised by the question. "Eleanor? Not well, but we spoke occasionally." "Why?" "I bought something at her estate sale. An old camera. I'm trying to learn about its history." Her mother set down her gardening shears. "What kind of camera?" "A Polaroid from the 1970s. Her mother's face went pale. "Maya, you didn't." "What do you mean?" "Come inside. We need to talk." In the kitchen, her mother made tea with shaking hands. Maya had never seen her so upset. "Your grandmother had a camera like that," her mother said finally. "A Polaroid SX70. She bought it in 1973. Maya's heart began to race. "What happened to it?" "She threw it in the lake behind our old house. She said it was cursed." Her mother sat down heavily. "Maya, your grandmother could see things. She had a gift or maybe a curse. That camera, it showed her things that were going to happen." "What kind of things?" "Deaths. Accidents. Tragedies." Her mother's voice was barely a whisper. She tried to prevent them, but it never worked. The camera always got what it wanted. Maya thought about Alex, about the way fate had twisted to ensure he ended up in the hospital despite her intervention. "There's something else," her mother continued. "The camera didn't just predict deaths. It caused them. Everyone who used it extensively, they all died young. Linda Reeves, who owned it before your grandmother. A photographer named Maya Chen who had it in the 1960s. Maybe others before him." Maya's blood ran cold. "How do you know all this?" "Because your grandmother researched it. She kept files, newspaper clippings, anything she could find about the camera's history. She gave them to Eleanor Holloway before she died, along with a warning to never let the camera surface again." That evening, Maya sat in her studio staring at the Polaroid. Next to it lay a thick folder her mother had retrieved from the attic, her grandmother's research on the camera. The files painted a horrifying picture. The camera had appeared in records dating back to the 1940s, always associated with sudden deaths and mysterious accidents. But the pattern was clear. The camera didn't just predict death, it demanded it. Every owner had tried to use its power to save people, and every owner had eventually paid the price. The camera required balance, For every death prevented, another had to take its place. Maya found a letter her grandmother had written to Eleanor Holloway. The camera feeds on death. When you try to cheat it, it simply finds another way. I prevented my neighbor's heart attack, and my husband died in a car crash the next week. I saved a child from drowning and my sister fell down the stairs. Each intervention costs more than we gain. The only way to stop it is to never use it again. But Maya had already used it. She'd taken Alex's photo, and his accident had been partially prevented. According to the pattern, that meant someone else would have to die in his place. Unless Maya picked up the camera and aimed it at herself again. If she was going to die anyway, maybe she could control when and how. Maybe she could ensure that her death would satisfy the camera's hunger and protect everyone else. She pressed the shutter. The photo that emerged showed something different this time. Instead of lying in a hospital bed, she saw herself standing in her studio, but the studio was on fire. Flames engulfed the walls and smoke filled the air. In the photo she was reaching for something, the camera itself sitting on the desk. The message was clear. The camera wanted to be destroyed, but it would take her with it. Maya spent the night researching fire safety and destruction methods. If she was going to die in a fire, she wanted to make sure it didn't spread to other buildings or hurt anyone else. She moved the camera to an isolated warehouse on the outskirts of town, a building scheduled for demolition that she rented for a day. She brought gasoline, matches, and a letter she'd written to Alex explaining everything. As the sun set, Maya stood in the empty warehouse with the camera. She thought about all the lives it had claimed, all the grief it had caused. Linda Reeves, her grandmother's husband, her great-aunt, and countless others throughout the decades. But she also thought about the lives it had saved. Alex was alive because of the warning. Maybe other people had been saved too, even if the cost had been terrible. Maya picked up the camera one last time and took a final photo of herself. This one showed her exactly as she was, standing in the warehouse, surrounded by gasoline cans, holding a lit match. She smiled. At least this time, the camera's prediction wouldn't come as a surprise. Maya dropped the match. 3 days later, Alex stood outside the burned remains of the warehouse, reading the letter Maya had left for him. The fire department had ruled it an accidental explosion. A gas leak, they said, ignited by an electrical spark. They'd found Maya's body near what appeared to be an old camera, both completely destroyed by the flames. Alex didn't understand most of what the letter explained. It talked about cameras that could see death, about family curses, about sacrifices made to protect the people you loved. It sounded like the plot of a horror movie. But he remembered Maya's strange behavior before his accident. Her desperate attempts to keep him home, her mysterious knowledge of dangers that shouldn't have existed. And he remembered something else, a conversation with their grandmother years ago before she died. She'd told him about a camera that could see the future, about the price of knowing too much about fate. He'd thought it was just an old woman's fantasy. Now he wasn't so sure. Alex folded the letter carefully and slipped it into his jacket pocket. As he walked back to his car, he didn't notice the small Polaroid photo that had somehow survived the fire, lodged between two pieces of debris. The photo showed Alex himself, standing exactly where he was now, but with one difference. In the image he was holding a Polaroid camera. The wind picked up the photo and carried it across the street, where it landed at the feet of a young woman browsing an estate sale. She picked it up, curious about the vintage quality of the image. "Excuse me," she called to the estate sale coordinator. "Where did this photo come from?" The woman glanced at the image. "Oh, that must have blown over from the fire site. Probably just old junk. You can keep it if you want." The young woman smiled and slipped the photo into her purse. She had always been interested in vintage photography. Later that day she would find an old Polaroid camera at another estate sale, half melted but still functional. The seller would claim it had been recovered from a recent fire, cleaned up and restored. She would buy it for $15. And the cycle would begin again.